This girl, her name's Kara, and Kara is about to get kidnapped by a serial killer. One day, Kara had just stayed the night at her friend's house, and she's helping her friend with her chores, and she volunteers to go outside and water the plants. So Kara heads out to the front yard, she grabs the hose, and she starts watering all the flowers and bushes. And that is when she notices a car driving by. And it's no big deal. But then the same car drives by again and pulls into the driveway and it parks. And then a guy gets out and he has a binder. And he's like, "Hello, are your parents around?" And Kara's like, "Oh, this is my friend's house." And he's like, "Are your friend's parents home?" And Kara's like, "They're not home right now." And he's like, "Well, I'm giving out magazines. Would you mind giving these magazines to them?" Then he steps forward to hand her the magazines. That is when, bam, he pulls out a pew-pew and he points it at her. And he's like, "You're coming with me." And he grabs her and he opens the door to his car and there's a big plastic container in the back seat. And he points the pew-pew at her and he's like, "Get in the container." And so she does. And he closes the lid, sealing her in. And then he gets in the car and he speeds away. And poor Kara, she's in this container and she's just panicking. About 10 minutes later, the car pulls over and the guy opens the container and he ties Kara up and he makes her get back in. Then they drive a few more minutes before the car stops again. And it stops in the parking lot of an apartment complex. And the kidnapper, he gets out of the car and he picks up the container with Kara inside and he drags it into his apartment. A few minutes later, he opens it up. And Kara, she's still inside and she's still tied up. So he lets her out. And then he sits down with her and he starts asking her lots of questions and writing down the answers on a legal pad, like he's interviewing her. And he wants to know her full name, her address, the names and addresses of her friends. He wants to know about her boyfriend, her sexual history. It's weird. And once he's done with this weird-ass interview, he straight up threatens her. He's like, "Do everything I say or there will be consequences." And then he reminds her that he has a pew-pew. And then shortly after that, he, unfortunately, assays her multiple times. And now, eventually, he tries to get Kara to eat something. But as you can imagine, she isn't very hungry. She's like, "No, thanks, but is there anything I can do for you to help you?" The kidnapper's like, "Sure, you can sweep the kitchen floor." So Kara gets a broom, and she goes to sweep the kidnapper's kitchen floor. Now, she doesn't really want to sweep this turd's kitchen floor. She wants to appease him so that he doesn't flip out and suddenly unalive her. She also wants to learn as much information about him as she can, because Kara plans on getting out of this one way or another, and she wants information to identify him. She starts memorizing facts about the kidnapper. While she's in his kitchen sweeping, she uses this opportunity to get close to the refrigerator. Pinned on that fridge are magnets for his doctor and his dentist. She memorizes the names of his doctor and his dentist, and she just keeps on collecting more and more info on him. She strikes up a conversation with him, and she learns that he was in the military. Specifically, he was discharged from the Navy. At one point, she's in the bathroom, and she finds a hairbrush with long red hair in it. She also finds feminine hygiene products. She knows a woman with red hair probably also lives there with him. She also sees that he has a pet guinea pig and a pet lizard, and she memorizes all of this information too. Then, finally, hours later, it's around 2 or 3 in the morning, and the kidnapper, he makes her take a volume. Then he takes her, and he handcuffs her to his bed, and he restrains her right leg, and then he lays down next to her, and he falls asleep. That is when Kara is like, "All right, this is my chance to escape." But then the volume starts kicking in, and she's hours later, Kara wakes up, and it's just starting to get light outside, and she's still handcuffed, and she's still tied up, and she looks over, and the kidnapper, he's still asleep. She tries to slide her hands out of the handcuffs, but it's not working. They're on too tight. But then she notices the handcuffs are attached to a rope with a quick link, which is like one of those little link things. So as quietly as she can, she bites down on it. She clamps her teeth around the screw, and somehow she loosens it enough to slide the handcuffs out. Then she uses her free hands to disconnect her leg restraint, and silently, she slides out of bed. And luckily, the kidnapper, he's still asleep. So she tiptoes through the apartment, and then, bam, she runs out the front door and into the complex parking lot. Outside, there's a car driving by, and she runs straight toward it, and she waves her arms to flag it down, and the car stops, and the guys inside her like, "What the fuck is this?" She's like, "I was just kidnapped, and I escape. Take me to the police, please." So these guys, they drive her to the sheriff's department. There, she's telling the officers the whole story. The deputy, he's like, "Okay, can you help us find this guy's apartment?" And Kara's like, "Hell, yes, I can." So they drive her back over to the apartment complex to try and find this apartment. Here's the problem with that. It's an apartment complex, so all the units look the same. Kara, she doesn't know the exact unit, so they flag down the property manager of the complex. The deputy asks Kara if there's anything she can remember about the guy that they can use to identify him. And Kara's like, yeah. And she tells them he lives in a bottom left unit. And she describes the guy, and she describes his car, and she says he's got a pet guinea pig and a pet lizard, and maybe he lives with a woman with long red hair. Everything she remembers. And the property manager is like, I think I know who this guy is. So then they take care of the hospital to get her checked out. Meanwhile, the police, they use all the information she has given them, like his doctor's name and his dentist info and all of that stuff, to find out who this guy is. This kidnapper ends up being this creep, Richard, ex-military, total weirdo, lives in that apartment with his wife who just happens to have long red hair. No idea where the wife is during all this. Now, of course, by the time police go to Richard's apartment, he's no longer there. He fled, but they searched the place.